It'll take years for Health New Zealand to unravel a systemic culture of underperformance, writes Rachel Smalley this week. And Rachel, obviously, we've got the launch of Health New Zealand, but you start by telling a story of a couple of ordinary New Zealanders.
Yeah, Janice and Paul Hampton. Through the course of some of my work, I come across people who are sometimes caught up needing medicines that aren't funded in New Zealand. And Janice and Paul initially fell into that category. And they're quite a remarkable story because they're both long serving public servants. Janice has been in the public health space for many years, almost 40 years, the majority of her life since she left school. And she now works out with corrections in Rolleston Prison in the mental health space, working with some of the prisoners there. And Paul is a policeman, and he's been a policeman since his early 20s, and he's now approaching retirement. And they've both been caught up by a health system, which is, well, their story to me is not only traumatic, but super frustrating. Janice was diagnosed eventually with lung cancer, and she has fought tooth and nail to try and get an appointment at oncology at Christchurch Public Hospital, and in the end had to give up. And it's cost them thousands of dollars. They've had to take all of their treatment through the private system. And those situations won't change with a new structure, but it gives an indication, I think, of just what Rob Campbell, the new chair of Health NZ, is going to come up against when he tries to bring about remarkable systemic change in our health system.
Yeah, it's so frustrating when you think you can turn to the health service for basic services like that, when you've paid your taxes all your life kind of thing. So, new chair Rob Campbell's got his work cut out for him then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I find most frustrating, and I'm sure probably a number of your listeners will as well at NBR, is that, leadership is something that is really important to any organization, but none more so, I think, when you are a public servant. And for some time, I've been really frustrated at the lack of voice, if you like, that comes out of our health system. Increasingly now, you're getting some clinicians coming forward, you're getting nurses, you're getting frustrated people who are absolutely overwhelmed by what they're faced with in the system. But why do we never hear from the voices of the 20 odd something DHBs that have been run in this country? Why aren't we hearing the people who are running the hospitals, the managers, the leaders in this space, who've been charged essentially with looking after the health and providing a duty of care to New Zealanders? And when they can't, and when the system's broken, why don't we have those voices speaking out against the system? And it's a frustration of mine that I think they fall in line with whatever the government is of the day, and they find themselves sort of twisting data and moving numbers around to try and lessen the media's, reporting of some of the issues that we're facing in our health system. I'd love to see some more courageous voices coming out from within our former DHBs.
Yes, because you're saying you believe that there's an accepted and systemic culture of underperformance. Accepted and systemic, those are strong words.
Yeah, they are. But I think if you look right throughout the health system, where, you look at the Southern DHB, you look at the Waikato Hospital at the moment, I can name people in every system right now who've been failed by the system. There's another public health nurse in Waikato Hospital right now who's funding her own breast cancer treatment so that she can go back to work as a nurse in the system. It's the same with Janice in the Christchurch public hospital system as well, or the Christchurch health system. It is systemic because we know there are problems right throughout New Zealand with our hospitals, with underperformance, with the lack of access to medicines. We aren't training enough people. We haven't opened up our borders for nurses to come through, or certainly we haven't given them the green light to residency like we have with other sectors. And while we're hearing some voices come out on the nurses issue at the moment, we still don't hear people speaking out and telling the minister that he's wrong, actually, that there are issues with the health system, that there are things that they could be doing better, and that there is a human cost to all of this, Maria. I mean, that's the greatest challenge, I think, is that there are everyday New Zealanders, just like the story that I wrote about Janice and Paul, that illustrate, middle New Zealand getting left behind. I mean, they have both committed some 70 years of their life to public service, and they need what is chemotherapy, publicly accessible, publicly funded on the health system, and they can't get an appointment at the oncology department for months. I mean, that is systemically wrong. There are major issues in the health system, and I'm not sure a change in title is going to fix that.
Yeah, postcode healthcare. And ironically, Janice is working in mental health for prisoners, for corrections. And of course, that's one area where we have a huge health worker shortage. I just did a piece this week about the shortage of psychologists and how the system organising their internships is not centralised. So I guess this is one thing we'll be hoping for from Health New Zealand, isn't it? Better coordination of services across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Rob Campbell is the right man for the job, but I think he's probably facing his greatest challenge yet to try and bring about change and try to change that culture. Will he encourage and bring more of those people around the table? Will we encourage our leaders to speak out? I'd certainly like to see more of that within the public service, within Wellington, speaking out against some of the things that aren't working. And instead, we tend to avoid pointing the finger at policies or landing any minister in a difficult situation with which to answer questions. But courageous, bold, brave leadership, particularly in a health system which is dealing with our most vulnerable, we need those voices. And that's the job that Rob Campbell's got cut out for him in trying to bring about remarkable change in an industry that we throw billions of dollars at every year.
Rachel Smalley, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Maria.